Hello, and welcome to another episode of American Talk. Today we're going to discuss why exactly so many people are talking about racism and sexism in modern America, and why companies, universities, and even the federal government have been pushing diversity training and inclusion courses. Now, in 2021, we would think that we were in a post-racial society. Congress has passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. But today, the cries of racism and sexism are loud and clear. Many Americans, including the current President Joe Biden, have even stated that Americans must cleanse itself from systematic racism and implicit bias. As I digged further into this ideology, I read about unfamiliar terms such as intersectionality, white privilege, critical race theory, and the 1619 Project. Now, intersectionality was first coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a feminist American civil rights lawyer and professor at the UCLA and Columbia Law. Now, Ms. Crenshaw defines intersectionality as a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that are often not understood in conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. It is a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. Now, to provide a real-world example of how intersectionality or multiple levels of social injustice works, we will use Ms. Crenshaw's example of Emma DeGraffenreid versus General Motors. Now, Emma had sued General Motors on two accounts, being that they were sexist and racist, but in this case, they used compound discrimination. The plaintiff stated that although women worked for office and secretarial jobs, they barred African American women. The court in this case weighed in on the allegations of racism and sexism separately, finding that African American male factory workers dispelled the notion of racism and the employment of white females disproved gender discrimination. The court did not consider compound discrimination, as the plaintiffs described, and dismissed the case. Now let us take a step back. The court in this case stated that sexism and racism do not exist based on the white women and black males that worked within the company. Now Ms. Crenshaw is claiming that even though these set of people were hired, discrimination must have taken place because the individual was black and a woman. Now this is really insane. Are we to seriously believe this allegation? How else should an employer have to prove they are not sexist and racist? Should they have hired Ms. DeGraffenreid? We don't know. And Ms. Crenshaw does not explain. Now when I continue to read about Ms. Crenshaw's work, I notice another term coined by her called critical race theory. Another term I've been hearing is the 1619 Project, which is authored by Ms. Hannah Jones and has won a Pulitzer Prize award, and deals with such theories. Now, critical race theory asserts that white supremacy exists and maintains power through the law. It attempts to critique classical liberalism by rejecting the idea of colorblindness, legal equality, rationality, and even pushes for the separation of the races. Now, this theory uses much of critical theory, which is defined as a social theory oriented toward critiquing and changing societies as a whole. Critical theory was established by members of the Frankfurt School. The school was started by Marxist sociologists and theorists, such as Gregory Lukács, Antonio Gramsci, Herbert Marcuse, Theodor Adorno, and Mark Horkheimer. These Marxists have influenced various communists within our society, such as Marcuse's own student, Angela Davis, or how his books, such as The Eros of Civilization, have influenced radical groups such as Antifa and earlier leftist civil rights groups. Their goal is to liberate human beings from the circumstances that enslave them. In other words, they're using Marxist conflict theory, being the base and superstructure. The base, according to Marx, is the means and relations of production, being tools, land, raw materials, the proletariat, bourgeoisie, private property, and commodities. The base is what shapes and maintains the superstructure, being the law, media, science, philosophy, art, culture, religion, and family. The superstructure is what maintains and shapes the base. By destroying and or changing one, you can change the other, according to Marx. Now, Marxists, Frankfurt critical theorists, and critical race theorists proclaim that in order to do this, we must radically transform the country economically to do so politically. They call for the elimination of capitalism by pursuing equal equity, or in other words, equal outcome. They use disparities among statistics and parameters to continue the false notion that America is collectively racist, and that in order to fix it, we must decolonize, as opposed to understanding that people make different choices on the basis of their own discrimination, and that individuals are either good or bad. They lie about our history by claiming that the U.S. was founded in 1619 when some of the first slaves came to British North America. They forget that our founding fathers were students of the Enlightenment and claim that our founding fathers fought the Revolution on the basis of maintaining slavery, without acknowledging that our founding fathers, such as Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, and even George Mason, had very conflicting and negative views towards slavery. They mentioned that acts such as the Three-Fifths Compromise, proposed by Madison in 1787, as proof of racist ideology. But forget that. But forget that this was a win for true freedom, and that it stopped Southern slave owners from gaining more rights in Congress, and doing more harm toward black individuals in America. These radicals view capitalism as an evil that only upholds slavery, and forget to mention that if it were not for true capitalists, such as the Unionites during the Civil War and those that helped in the Reconstruction of the South, this would have not taken place. Now, sadly, they do not realize that capitalism not only provides economic, but political freedom, and that it gives an individual liberty in its purest form, being the freedom to choose, individual inalienable rights, property rights, and the freedom to pursue one's dream without a state or other individual to tell them how to live. The American Republic, for which it stands, must protect what is left of capitalism and what is left of the freedoms we hold dear. Without doing so, true equality will die.